So I guess they've been waiting on Batman to show up. And it is Sasquatch. Welcome to Bat Lessons, the Batman History Podcast. I am Brian Anders, and I am joined by Alex Cash. And today we're going to learn about another early Batman writer and artist, and then we're going to dive into some early Batman stories they worked on that introduce key elements of the character.
That's right. Last time we read Detective Comics number 27, and it was written by Bill Finger and drawn by Bob Kane. And as we noted, Bill Finger wrote over 1,500 Batman stories, but he's far from the only Golden Age writer to write Batman. In fact, while Bill Finger did write Batman's second story in Detective Comics number 28, the next 7 stories were written by someone else. So issues 29 through 35, with the exceptions of 2 pages, were written by a man named Gardner Fox. So who's Gardner Fox? So he was a writer, another Brooklyn native who was born in 1911. He studied law at St. John's College and joined the New York bar and practiced law for a few years. By all accounts, he enjoyed being a lawyer, but it coincided with the Great Depression, and so there wasn't a ton of financial downside to leaving and becoming a writer, which he enjoyed more. And much like Bill Finger was recruited to become a comics writer by Bob Kane, despite not having any real professional history, Fox was recruited by his friend since elementary school, Vince Sullivan. At the time, he was writing fill-in stories, and a fill-in is kind of what it sounds like. It's a story that's made by a different creative team that keeps a book on schedule. So, for example, like if you and I, Brian, are writing, Superman. We write 1, 2, 3 to come out in like June, July, August, but we're behind on the September book. We would use a fill-in issue to do September, and then we'd be back in October.
Doing a podcast, like the idea of fill-ins is kind of nice.
Yes.
And like keeping your schedule and whatnot. But I was also thinking about just like shows that I've liked in the past and how common something like a fill-in is, and you've got different directors for different episodes.
Sure.
So like with the X-Files, Supernatural, those are like really famous, maybe even notorious for some people for having like that big overarching storyline that is not referenced in every single episode. They've got rando tangent episodes all over the place, and so it seems like those are like good types of fill-in episodes in like a modern kind of angle.
And modern comics do this too. Like it is not unusual for like people talk about runs. There will be either a writer or writer-artist combo that is in charge of a book at a given point in time. Like we just finished the Nick Spencer run on Spider-Man, right? And he'll write issue, 68, 67, 66, 65, 64, but like maybe 63, they weren't ready. And so someone else wrote that issue, right? It happens all the time.
Yeah. And so like we watch a lot of crime stuff. So it's like NCIS, CSI, Criminal Minds, like all those types of shows. And they all have those fill-in type things.
They just pad it out.
Yeah, they like do an episode where like this has nothing to do with the whatever killer that they're after for the season, but like they still have cases to solve and whatnot.
So he was doing fill-ins for Speed Saunders, which was another story that ran monthly in Detective Comics alongside Batman, Cotton Carver, which ran in Adventure Comics. But Bill Finger had only written 2 stories. And Fox is only a fill-in writer for other recurring comics. But despite all that fact, that Gardner Fox starts writing Batman full-time in Detective Comics. So there's some conflicting characterizations of exactly how this went, so we don't exactly know why. In Jim Steranko's History of Comics, the story goes that Whitney Ellsworth, who was an associate editor at the time underneath Vince Sullivan, quote, takes Finger off of Batman. It doesn't go into any reason, just says that Ellsworth is the one making the call, and that it's explicitly about taking Finger off the book. History of Comics it's kind of like this. It's one of the earlier comic book history books, and because it was written in 1970, we know it was compiled from lots of interviews with creators that were actually there in the Golden Age, so it's very well regarded, but it covers a ton. So it doesn't go into a whole lot of detail. I've also been reading a much more recent book from 2021 called The Creators of Batman by an author named Rick Worth. And I'm really appreciating this book because it covers a lot of the early years after Detective number 27 with a focus on creators. So either you get books like The History of Batman that's more focused on the story, or you have like Bill the Boy Wonder that's like very much about the first Batman story. This is one that covers the period right after, which I really like.
Cool.
At some point, I'd love to have Rick on the show to talk about it. But his accounting of events doesn't mention Ellsworth at all, which makes sense to me because Gardner Fox was Vince Sullivan's friend, the editor-in-chief. So why an associate editor is involved, I'm not really sure. But the book goes on to say that it's not super clear why Fox is swapped in, whether it's that his writing is preferred or, maybe Bill Finger is having trouble keeping up with the schedule. It is 7 issues right in a row, so it's not just like a fill-in here or there. My intuition is that it actually probably does have a lot to do with scheduling. Bill Finger is notorious for not hitting deadlines. It's something that a lot of people talk about in interviews with him. And even as Fox is writing Batman stories through issue 35, he shares issue 33, Bill Finger. So that's that 2 pages that we were talking about earlier. And that 2-page story is a pretty important one. So I think it implies that they still trust Bill Finger with the character. And you have to remember that Finger is writing other strips for Kane at the time, including Rusty and His Pals, which is another story that's running in Adventure Comics. And we know off the bat that Batman's a success, but it's not, Batman isn't what we think it is today. So it's not this great offense that like he's not writing the second story or the third story or whatever. Whatever the reason, Finger is never on record as being upset that Fox has taken over Batman. If anything, Finger has a really high level of regard for Gardner Fox. Bill Finger is an avid reader. That's one of the things that comes up over and over and over again when people talk about him in books, is that he loves fiction. And Fox is a great writer, a very successful writer. He writes like over 150 novels, very successful in pulp magazines. And we know that Finger loved pulps. So, has an appreciation for Fox. He takes over and he only writes 7 stories. And he doesn't write another Batman story until 1964, right? So 1939, 1940, he writes a few issues and then is out of the picture for many years to come.
For 20 years?
Yeah, that's right. He comes back to the character in 1964.
That's a long time.
Yes, it is.
Wow.
But even having only written these 7 stories, he introduces some really important tropes for the character, which I won't spoil now, but we're going to read a story that he wrote in just a minute, and we're going to get to learn about some of the things that he brought to Batman. It's not really important to the history we're talking about today, but I do feel obligated to let you know, like people are going to be really mad at me if I don't, that after these 7 stories, Fox goes on to create tons of stuff that He's the creator of The Flash, of Hawkman, Dr. Fate, Zatanna, DC's Sandman, and the Justice Society of America. And Justice Society is like the first team book, right? So like the Avengers don't exist without Justice Society in the MCU, ostensibly. He also writes a really important...
then.
Yeah, he writes a really important issue of The Flash called The Flash of Two Worlds, which is kind of like the first multiverse book. So kind of a big deal for the DC universe.
So can I ask you a question that you may not know the answer to?
Sure.
What came first, Superman moving super fast or The Flash?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay, because I'm thinking to like the influence of stuff, and like coming up with The Flash cold is really impressive, Yeah. Riffing off of and like peeling back powers from Superman to make spin-off characters is like not that impressive,
So Superman at first, it's worth noting, is not as powerful as he becomes later. Superman is primarily
he couldn't
inspired...
fly and stuff, right? He literally leaped buildings.
Right. One of his major inspirations was John Carter of Mars, and John Carter of Mars' whole thing is that he's from Mars where the gravity is stronger, so he's just a stronger person and can jump higher and all that kind of stuff. Right. Becomes, And so that's kind of where they're riffing with Superman. And if you watch like the Fleischer cartoons that were from the 30s, his big thing is he leaps tall buildings in a single bound, right? And he's faster than a speeding locomotive. Right. But that's not like running around the Earth in a second.
Right.
And that's not flying, right? Like he can run 70 miles an hour. Is that faster than the Flash? I don't know. This is a good question. We'll have to maybe loop back on that in a future episode. I do, I want to keep the show mostly focused on Batman, but I think it would be worth doing as we step through the ages to maybe do an episode about what's going on in the rest of the DC universe, because it's going to cross over a lot.
I'm only asking the question to give more credibility to Gardner Fox in his creative,
Yeah, people talk about Gardner Fox even now, and they don't necessarily talk about his originality. One of the things, although I think, the proof is in the pudding that he was, one of the things that they really talk about, one of the reasons he's celebrated these days, is he's particularly socially conscious. He has, views and themes in his book that are ahead of the time, let's say, in terms of racial equality and gender equality and things like that. So I thought we would go ahead and read Detective Comics number 29. And this is the first issue that Gardner Fox writes. And you can immediately see some of the differences that are in this issue.
For reference, what issue does Batman appear in?
27. So this is the third 27. Batman story.
Okay.
Yeah, so Bill Finger writes 27, 28, And here we are on the third story, 29, and Gardner Fox is writing it. So here we are, the cover of Detective Comics number 29. Do you want to tell us about it?
Sure. So the standard like big old Detective Comics stuff at the top, July 1939. So you've got Batman swinging into what looks like a castle window, and it is like very distinctly like my visualization of like modern Batman looks like. Essentially, he's got like the black / navy blue cowl and what do you call that? Like waist? I don't know. Underwear. It's outer underwear.
Trunks.
What do you call that?
Yeah.
Trunks. Okay. He's got his cape / wings furled out to the sides. He's swinging in on a rope, and he's got like the gray suit, golden belt, the utility belt. He's all set, and it looks like he's kicked a thug. I guess that's what they call him. And
Sure.
So
Yeah,
there's
kind
like
of a
the
thug.
bad guy. He's the thug. So he's kicked this thug in the chest, and the thug's falling backwards. He's dropping a knife. And in the foreground, there's this dude who, I mean, he looks like Frankenstein,
The doctor, not the monster.
The doctor, not the
Yes.
monster, yeah. Wearing a monocle. He's like looking over his shoulder like, oh no, Batman's here. But the reason I call it a Frankenstein is it looks like this is Frankenstein's castle. And there's a bunch of like experimental equipment sitting around. There's even like a human skull on a desk in the background. So it looks like Batman is swinging in to kind of ruin the night of Dr. Frankenstein.
This is also the first cover of Detective Comics that is actually an image of something that happens in the story for issues 27 and 28. They're not things that are from the story, so this is from the book.
Okay, that's interesting. In the previous episode, we talked about Batman being hyphenated.
Yes.
And I noticed that the cover of this one did not have Batman hyphenated.
No.
Right? But the title card and this first page does have Batman hyphenated.
Well, so this is going to drive you banana sandwich. I was waiting
Okay.
for you to notice in the title card, in the large block text, it is hyphenated by Bat-Man, and then the very next line says
The Batman meets Dr. Death, not hyphenated.
not hyphenated twice in
And
one
I'm-
panel.
Yeah.
Two
And I'm
different
looking in the
ways.
dialogue, just kind of looking ahead at the dialogue, and they are using Batman.
No hyphen.
No hyphen, but it is Bat Spaceman, it looks like.
Yeah. So they're kind of
So
all over the
that's
place.
great.
There's the
Yeah.
editor doesn't really care apparently.
Apparently not. And then we've got Batman standing in the door. He's kind of got that like Nosferatu, like vampire look. He's got the cape up over his shoulders and stuff, and he's kind of looming over the scene. And presumably Dr. Death is sitting, I'm guessing that because of the title card, but there's this dude with the monocle, looks like a scientist, bald, black beard. He's got that like stereotypical like white suit on, like pressed white suit for his scientific stuff. He's sitting at this desk with all sorts of stuff going on, experimental chemistry looking things. A skull again, and either he's got his shadow on the wall behind him, or there's
I think
a
that's a
hint
shadow,
at a
yeah.
person. Okay, I was guessing it was a shadow. So that's essentially the title card. Is Batman is walking in on Dr. Death. Dr. Death does not know Batman's there.
And the title card is like a second cover, right? So this is not meant to be a where this story is starting. It's just
Right.
a portent of things to come. The first panel of the story, we have a caption that's written on a scroll, and it says, "The Batman, eerie figure of the night, has become a legendary figure of the life of the teeming metropolis, righting wrongs and bringing justice where it has never been before." And we have, again, Dr. Death, right? And he's sitting at a desk, and he's smoking a cigarette, and he says, "Jabba, come here." We go to the next panel, and it's the same dude, the thug, as you described him, that Batman is kicking on the cover of the comic book. His name is Jabba, and he's got a turban. It is, a racist depiction of, I'm not sure exactly where this person's from. They're, could be North Africa, could be the Middle East, could be, Southeast Asia, right? Maybe Indian, but it's a large man, clearly has a different skin color than Dr. Death. He's got his arms crossed and he's got his turban. And Dr. Death says, "Jabba, I have at last completed all my laboratory experiments. My death pollen extract is definite. I am ready to exact my tribute from the wealthy of the world. They will either pay tribute to me or die. And yet one thing troubles me. The man they call the Batman, a crime such as ours, is sure to attract his attention. He must be done away with. If I knew who he is, but no one does. I must trap him. Perhaps we can contact him through the personal notice column in the daily newspapers," which is a really funny idea. So like this is like the classifieds, right? He's like, maybe we can contact Batman through the classifieds.
So the next panel is Bruce Wayne sitting in his study or something, reading the newspaper. Like apparently he's gonna read the classifieds.
That's right. Yeah. What's this?
Smoking a big pipe. Yeah.
The ad says, Batman, if you will go to the General Post Office and ask for a letter addressed to John Jones, you will find a message of vital importance.
Oh, this is like never going to work. Any rando who reads the newspaper can walk up and say, hey, do you have a letter addressed to John Jones?
Everyone's like, oh man, private message for Batman. I want to figure what's in that.
Yeah. So usually the way they do this stuff is it's like a double code. Like you put something that like hints at something else that only the readers have any context of. So it'd be like a letter for Dr. Zero. The peacock flies at noon, and then the reader knows what that means, right. But it's hidden to the general public. So
it's also,
they're not doing that.
No, they're not. on page 1, they said, the teeming metropolis. And here he's going to the General Post Office, like as if maybe this is
just one.
Yeah. or maybe it's like the distribution center for all the post offices. It's also a really interesting, like talking about anachronisms, like last time we read a story, it was like ho-hum and like transom and things like that. The idea that you could just like write a letter and leave it at the post office to like someone could come pick it up is like, is there postage on this? Can you just do that? Like I'm writing a letter to someone in the city and like they're going to hold it there. Like, not the way that a post office works in my life. I didn't do research about whether that's the case or if this is just a silly thing to begin with. But next panel, we have Bruce Wayne. He's at the post office. There's, a clerk at the desk, and he says, have you a letter addressed to John Jones?
It is really funny that, like, doesn't the post office person also read the newspaper? And wouldn't he just be like, oh, hi, Batman, Bruce Wayne. Ah, okay, I can connect the dots here. Yeah, I've been waiting for you.
Oh, snap. This dude's Batman.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe they're like counting on the fact that no one reads it. So the letter says, Batman, at 10 p.m. tonight at Suite B on the 14th floor of the Beverly Apartments, I will commit a murder and I defy you without the aid of police to stop me. So it's like, a challenge. It's kind of a Moriarty Sherlock thing. Like, don't bring the police. I bet you can't. And Bruce returns home and he kneels before a small chest and takes out his Batmantle.
Bruce Wayne in his suit is opening up a chest and pulling out what looks like the Batman costume. And he says, half an hour to change and half an hour to get to the penthouse. Takes him half an hour to change?
Yeah. And he's just like clearly like in the study like of his house or something, like, and it's just kind of right there and he's getting it out. Like there's no bat pole to the bat cave.
There's no bat cave.
Yeah. He's not in a rush. Yeah. It's like, oh, like I'm going to go do this thing later.
And just like in that last episode, I was saying it's just some dude in a bat suit driving a car.
Yeah.
Like there's no Batmobile. It's just
right.
Like imagine being on the road and like looking over, like do what the like.
Yeah, there's a dude in a Batman costume.
Yeah.
He says these gas pellets of choking gas might come in handy tonight if this is what I think it is. Likewise, these suction gloves and knee pads. The penthouse will require a bit of climbing. And this is one of the things that Gardner Fox introduces to Batman. So we have the yellow belt in issue 1 and issue 2, but this is the first time he's putting things into it. So he's putting the gas pellets in the belt. He's got these suction cups. They're kind of gadgets, right?
Yeah.
We do have reference in the previous issue to a silk rope. So, Bill Finger does have, Batman using tools, but the only tool he has him using is the rope to swing, from building to building. So this is one of Gardner Fox's big contributions is kind of the gadget.
So Batman is all suited up and he's ready to rock and roll. And then he hops into not the Batmobile, just like in the last episode, but a red old
classic
probably
car.
A Rolls Royce. Yeah, it's a classic car. It does make me wonder if it's like a pedestrian car or if it's like a rich person's car.
I don't know. Yeah.
Because that would be kind of interesting as like a sleuth on the street to be like, oh, there goes someone who looks like Batman in a extremely nice car. Batman
Right.
must be wealthy.
Yeah. I don't know. Like, when was the Model T? That was like the 1910s, right? I guess
something like that.
I don't know. He says 8:30 exactly. I'm off. I love that they're super worried about the schedule, like the timing of events that occurred here.
Also, hopefully, he doesn't hit any traffic.
Yes,
right. Like he's down to the wire. He's gonna show up right on time and walk in.
We turn the page here, and one of the things that is really interesting to me is that Gardner Fox is a lot less wordy than Bill Finger, and he's actually a lot less wordy than like most of the Golden Age writers, right? Usually pages like this are just like riddled with words. And in fact, there are captions and or speech bubbles in every single panel. There's not a single panel in this that is wordless, but this entire page is, you know, very action driven. You can just look at the pictures and not read any of the words and know exactly what's going on. And that is not true necessarily for a lot of Golden Age writers. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, so Batman shows up. It's at some sort of a construction site. He sneaks through the construction zone. He throws a rope up to a ledge, and then he uses the ledge to climb up. And then he switches over to his suction pads. Just they look like suction cups that go on his hands and on his knees. Mm-hmm. And I bet he looks really awkward shimmying up the wall that way. But he Mission Impossible climbs up this skyscraper just like Tom Cruise in Dubai. And he's at the penthouse. He climbs up onto the ledge of kind of a garden terrace outside of the suite. Yep.
So he's gotten the letter, right, from Dr. Death, the challenge to show up without the aid of the police. And he says, okay, I'm going to do it. He dresses up like Batman, right? He gets there. You know, the captions are kind of funny. They're very specific about the fact that like he's parking across the street in an abandoned lot where there's some construction happening. He throws the rope up, like it's not working very well. And he's like, let me switch to the suction cups, climbs up the building, and he's up there, right? So kind of a cool action sequence of like, you know, he's scaling a building from the outside.
Mm-hmm.
And then it says, for a quick getaway, the Batman has his rope handy, and he sort of ties it up on the ledge of the building, so implying that he's going to get away by rope out the window again.
So, like you said, he tied up the rope from the corner of this building, basically, so that he can make his quick getaway. He goes to the edge of the terrace, I guess, where there's big glass doors. I mean, I would say it's a very stereotypical Batman move if you've seen the movies, for him to like just show up at the doorway opening to a patio or something like that. So it's kind of like that. And he's standing there with his arms up, his wings out, etc. It looks a little menacing.
Kind of in silhouette against the moon.
In silhouette, yeah, and his shadow's coming in. There's a couple of thugs that are obviously hiding in wait, as I feel like any idiot would be expecting after this whole setup. One's behind the curtains holding a gun. The other one's hiding behind a couch, also holding a gun. Unseen by Batman are the gunmen placed to trap him by Dr. Death. And one of them says,
he bit for it. Shall I give it to him? No, the doctor said to kill him inside, so the police will find him in here. Wait, he's coming in.
And then Batman, he opens up these big glass doors and starts to walk in.
So yeah, he comes inside and he kind of turns around and he sees, you know, they turn on the light and he sees the thugs and he says, put him up, Batman. We've got you at last. But the gunmen reckon without the great speed and agility of the Batman. So Batman kind of like dives through the air and grabs a statue that's like on a Roman column.
Yeah.
In a really interesting way. You can see, you know, gunfire across the side. It goes bang, bang.
Yeah, so he tackles this column from kind of the mid to low half, which I don't really know if this would even work, because the way he's tackling it, the statue stays attached at the top, and it comes down and just smashes on this bad guy. One of the thugs. But I think actually what would happen is he'd knock this pillar over and the statue would stay put in air because it wouldn't be attached to the top of the pillar. And it would fall down on top of Batman. So,
kind of Looney Tunes style.
Yeah. But yeah, so anyway, he tackles this pillar, takes out both of the thugs in one hit. Then he jumps on top of one of the thugs and is just wailing on his face, just like in that last book that we had read. He's sitting on his chest, just socking him across the chin. And after they're all beaten up, he seemingly puts them in the corner and starts to talk to them.
Yeah, I think it's really funny that like we have this returning thing, and it could be just because like, you know, Bob Kane is like not a great artist and is just like reusing this is the same thing that he knows how to draw. But yeah, he's like straddled across them and like doing this like punching across thing.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I think you might have missed, right, is that yeah, he puts the two guys in the corner and he's talking to them, but in his hand
he's holding a gun.
He's holding a gun.
I did miss that. Yes.
Yeah. So Gardner Fox is the first person to put a gun in Batman's hand. I won't say that Bill Finger never does it, because he does it a few times. But Gardner Fox, far and away, is the person that puts a gun in Batman's hand the most. He does it repeatedly throughout these next few stories, which I think is really interesting. And he says, "And who sent you, may I ask? We can't tell you or he'd kill us. Your choice, gentlemen. Tell me or I'll kill you." And it's just like, kind of crazy. Batman's threatening these guys with a gun.
Because Batman doesn't kill. At the same time, he does bluff people a lot, where he insinuates that he's going to drop them off of buildings and then never actually does. He just scares the crap out of them.
Well, I think, it's safe to say that Batman does kill at this point in his history.
At this point, we saw him throw a person
into the acid tank.
I was thinking more of throwing them off of the building.
Yes, that too.
Killing them. They became a body once they hit the ground.
That's right. So, perhaps not a hollow threat at this point. Batman might be a killer in these first few issues. And then Jabba walks in the door and he says, "Good evening, Batman. Dr. Death sends his greetings." And Jabba fires. Bang.
It says the Batman is hit. He drops the gun. He's holding his shoulder, his right shoulder. So now we know Batman is right-handed. And there's a bleeding bullet hole kind of up in his upper right. It's not quite his shoulder. It's like the chest area, I guess probably where your rotator cuff is roughly.
Yeah, kind of almost collarbone.
Yeah, almost collarbone area. The wounded Batman ejects a glass pellet from his belt. So continuing to use the utility belt and...
Yeah, the Batman holds his breath and slams the gas pellet on the floor in front of the giant Indian. Oh, we have a confirmation. He's an Indian man. There
Indian, okay. I was going to guess because of the stereotypes that they were pulling from, it was going to be Southeast Asia, something. It reminded me a little bit of like Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, right? And how they dressed as well. Yeah, the Batman holds his breath, slams the glass pellet on the floor in front of the giant Indian man. Ugh, I'm choking.
And the room becomes filled with the deadly gas.
Deadly gas?
Yeah.
Dang.
I don't know if it actually is deadly or if that's just an adjective they're choosing to use. I think Jabba makes it out of this. But yeah, the room fills up with the gas and the wounded Batman leaps for the glass window leading to the penthouse roof.
So he jumps through the glass window and then he runs in, jumps off of the roof with these thugs running behind him. They say, "God, he's jumped off." And what they don't know is what we do know is he put that rope there ahead of time. He grabs the rope. He swings to the ledge.
Yeah, we got Chekhov's bat rope. We've come back for it.
Chekhov's bat rope. I like it.
And one of the things that's probably not clear as we're sort of reading it, I alluded to it a little bit before, is that like Gardner Fox is like very kinetic. We have, an entire page again of like, what is it? 6, 7, 8 panels, right? That happen in like no more than 15 or 20 seconds. Right. Yeah. And as you're reading it, the sort of speed of this is like very, where like he's hit with the bullet, he's throwing the gas pellet, he's jumping out the window, he's jumping off the ledge, right? There's not a lot of words. This is how modern comics often sort of work in action sequences. And so it's kind of ahead of its time. Golden Age, other authors, even in the Silver Age, like Stan Lee's Notorious, this would be like riddled with tons and tons and tons of words. Often ones that are like adding extra detail that's totally unnecessary or like contradict what's in the picture. So it's really, I think, great writing, at least in terms of action. And so he's standing on the ledge and it says, the blood's still seeping from his wound. He slips on suction gloves and knee pads. And then there's a time jump. We don't see him climbing down the building. Now he's in the car and it says, the Batman in his car places a pad of cotton on his bare shoulder. This will keep until I get to a phone booth. And then again, in the next panel, he's in a phone booth and it says, dressed in civilian clothes. Once more, Bruce Wayne, the Batman, enters a phone booth. And it says, Daily Globe. I want this inserted in your public notice column. I accept your challenge, Dr. Death, the Batman. So he's called up the newspaper and he's like passing a message back through the newspaper again as the Batman that he's accepted the challenge. And he says, I best I'd go see my family doctor at once. The shoulder is beginning to ache.
Beginning to ache. I have a bullet hole. Beginning to ache. Famously achy, those bullet holes.
Yep. So pre-Alfred, normally in like, modern comic, he would go to Alfred and Alfred would patch him up because, obviously, if you have a wound that is one that like Batman would have, it's kind of a little suspicious that you're showing up to the hospital and they're like, what's going on? Like, why are you like this?
Yeah. Who shot you?
Exactly. And they kind of hang a lantern on it. So the doctor says, it's all right now, Bruce, but how did you shoot yourself when there are no powder marks on your flesh? And then Bruce says, I do funny things sometimes, Doc. I'll tell you all about it someday. Thanks for everything. Like,
I'm not going to tell you.
Yeah, exactly. This is the 1939 equivalent of like, it's the scene from Batman Begins, right? Where, Batman's telling Lucius Fox that he's going to use the fabric that like hardens out as for like skydiving or base jumping or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he's effectively pleading the fifth in front of this doctor.
Yeah, exactly. The next morning in Dr. Death's study,
we've got Dr. Death sitting at his desk with the same 2 thugs that failed him. And now we know the Indian dude, Jabba, hanging out over his left shoulder. He goes, you fools, you bunglers. He walked into a trap and you let him go. If you miss the next time, ... kind of implying I'm going to destroy you guys. Follow me, Jabba. Also, I think it should be noted for the listeners who are like me, will want to know it's Jabba, Jabah,
Yes.
not Jabba, Jabba, like Jabba the Hutt.
Yeah.
Different Jabba.
Different Jabba.
So then now they're in the, I don't know, castle's basement.
Yeah, it's like a stone wall of like what look like large. It's like not bricks and it's not cinder block. They look like, like it would be a castle. And then there's the
Yeah, it's like the castle dungeons with like the iron grates across the openings for windows and stuff. There's light streaming in. And so I'm guessing this is what was depicted on the cover. This is like the whole scientific area. And Dr. Death says, here's a picture of John P. Van Smith. What a heck of a name. He refuses to pay tribute to me. He must die. I have immunized you with my serum from this pollen, which you will blow at your victim as he comes from his club tonight. So Jabba goes on his errand of death. And so Jabba, as you see him in the next panel walking away, he's got a cloak over him, but he's just, obviously this really big dude. He's got the turban. He's still got the same clothes underneath, you can tell, but he's wearing a big cloaky, capey thing. And that is actually reminiscent of like Batman's cape.
Yeah, so Dr. Death has called out a hit on this guy, John P. Van Smith. He gives this powder for Jabba to blow in his face, but apparently Jabba's like been immunized somehow. And just so happens, as Jabba's walking down the street, Bruce Wayne is driving by in his like suit, smoking his pipe and his hat.
In the same car that he drives in Batman. I did look it up, by the way, because he's driving this red car, but it's a convertible right now.
Yeah. Top down.
And it hasn't been a convertible previously. And I looked up, and in the 1944 Batman serial,
43 would have been.
Oh, 43 is a Cadillac Series 75 convertible.
Oh, there you go.
So there you go. Yeah.
And he says, my would-be killer of last night, I think I'll follow him. And then as this unsuspecting victim steps from his club.
This John P. Van Smith is wearing a suit, fedora, walking. Jabba sneaks up behind him with what very clearly looks like a big perfume puffer thing, except he blows on it. You can see he's got his lips puckered and he's blowing this pollen, this poisonous pollen onto this dude. And in the background, you see Bruce Wayne kind of running up.
Yeah, Bruce Wayne runs up behind him and he puts a cloth over his mouth and he says, don't breathe or you'll be dead. So like Jabba in the next panel is kind of running away as if he's like accomplished this task. And Bruce Wayne has like come in after him and like intervened and saved this dude. And he says, I haven't time for questions, but I have a hunch that if you had breathed in what that man blew, it would be curtains for you. I've got to trail him. Adieu. And so he follows Jabba back to what is presumably this castle. And Jabba's like going inside the fence. And Batman's still there in his sort of like, Bruce Wayne is still there in his sort of day clothes. And he says, prepare for a visit tonight, Dr. Death, from the Batman.
Because it takes him 30 minutes to change. He's not going to just like jump in right now.
He's got to go home.
He has to gotta go home. Got to get his suit and spend 30 minutes.
And that night, on the sidewalk behind Dr. Death's house,
Batman is there. He's climbing the fence, jumps down the other side. He uses his rope to climb up to the second story of the house. And he says, only a few minutes more, Dr. Death. We have a score to even.
So he's standing on the ledge, and we switch to an interior shot where we're looking out that same window that he was looking in. And there's
same silhouette shot as before, right?
Yeah. Well, he doesn't have his arms up, like holding up his cape as a bat. But yeah, he's like silhouetted by the moon. And it says, a creak of glass cutter, and the Batman enters, which is another gadget. So we're like 3 gadgets in at this point.
Glass cutters. By the way, just as like a note, I don't think he could cut through this glass because it's got all of those hash marks on it. So I think there's wire like inside of that glass.
Iron or lead or something.
I was thinking more like, when you're at school and you've got those like industrial doors with the wires inside of them.
Yeah.
I think it's so that they can't break like this.
That would make sense, I guess. I don't know if that is a thing in 1938 or 39 or whatever, but it's a fair point.
But it's also like an animated cartoon, so...
Right.
Let it ride.
I think it's probably the hash marks are there to signify that there's a material. Like it has to be glass. Like I don't know how you draw glass, especially when you've got like 5 colors or whatever. Six colors, whatever their limit is.
Yeah. I mean, you can imply glass pretty easily, I think. Like you've got the sheen on that mirror, for example.
Sure. That's true. In the last issue, we had the glass dome that lowered over, and there wasn't like hash marks all over that, I don't think.
Right.
The Batman finds Dr. Death and his servant, Jabba, in the laboratory. It won't be long, Doctor.
Batman's looking in the door, and then he takes a lasso, he swings it up over Jabba's head, and he jerks him back by the neck. So Jabba's holding at his throat, and he's being pulled backwards, basically being choked to death by Batman. There's his big, like, shadowy silhouette of Batman is in the background, and Dr. Death turns and he goes, "The Batman!" And so, assuming that Jabba's out of the picture right now, Batman jumps in the foreground, like running towards Dr. Death, who's got his back up against the wall. And Batman goes, "Good evening, Doctor, but it won't be after I'm through with you." He's throwing in his jokes. And Dr. Death is, "You fool." So Dr. Death, he presses a button and he drops into a secret chute on the ground. And Batman runs up, and he's got a thinking bubble this time. He says, "I can just make it before it closes, I hope." And then he jumps down into this chute in the floor, this trap door, not knowing what's down there at all. And then he lands on a mat on the ground, and so Batman lands on a mat on the ground, and you see kind of in the background Dr. Death running away around the corner. I assume he's laughing, but it doesn't say that he is.
So he doesn't in that last panel, but the third to the last panel on the page, he does. He's laughing as he's going down the trapdoor. He goes, "Hey, hey, hey."
Oh, you're right. Ha, 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 ha.
He's very, very pleased with himself. He prepared. He has a button on the wall,
Yes.
ready to go to drop himself down a trapdoor.
3 moves ahead.
Exactly. The Batman pursues Dr. Death relentlessly. So they're now like in this basement, and he's running after him. And this is really funny to me. He runs him in a loop, right? So he's dropped down this trap door, and he's running away from Batman. And then he like runs back up the stairs, and it says Dr. Death returns to the laboratory in a last desperate attempt to elude the Batman. So they've done like a Benny Hill around this house. Yakety Sax is playing, right? And he runs back into the lab and he says, "There is yet time." He grabs this vial, right? So Dr. Death is sort of like, like gearing up to throw something. Like he's got it behind his back, like he's getting ready to, and it's a vial of liquid. And he says, "You are too late, my foe. Watch the fiery death." And in that same panel, Batman's sort of across the way at the door, and he grabs a fire extinguisher off the wall and he throws it. So they're throwing things at each other, right? But Batman throws first. And he says he flings it at the Doctor, knocking the deadly tube onto the floor, where it swiftly ignites into a blazing inferno. So whatever that vial of liquid that the Dr. Death had is now started a fire in the lab because Batman threw a fire extinguisher. And I don't know, Brian, have you ever picked up a fire extinguisher?
They're pretty heavy.
They're pretty heavy. They're made of like metal.
Yeah, they're made of metal, but what's heavy is all of the powder and the compressed air that's inside of it. That's the real weight. So I mean, they're probably 25, 35 pounds.
Yeah, I mean, impressive that he is able to throw it, and then also like I would not want to be hit
on
by
the
one.
receiving end. Yeah. Dr. Death standing with fire all around him, kind of like the dog that says, "This is fine." And there's fire,
exactly
right?
Like that. Yes.
And yeah, so it's this big science experiment room with fire all over the place, and Dr. Death in the middle going, "Ha ha ha! Oh ha 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 ha! You fool!"
And then Batman says, "You are the poor fool. He has gone mad." And then we cut to the next panel. It's the last panel of the whole story. And we've got sort of the silhouette of Batman. He's standing in front of the door to this lab, right? The flames are shooting out of the door. The panel says, "Death to Dr. Death." So yeah, Batman at this point is assuming that Dr. Death is dead. He's burned him alive.
And killed him.
Yeah. But the stinger card, it says, "But is it death to the arch criminal? Follow further amazing and unique adventures of the Batman in next month's Detective Comics." We're not going to read Detective Comics 30, the one that happens immediately after this, but this is another thing that Gardner Fox is the first to do. Dr. Death does return. And so this is the first time we have a recurring villain, and it's the first time we have acknowledgement of what they call continuity, right? So when you talk about comic books and you hear someone say continuity, that means that like the events of the previous issue affect what happens the next one. So Dr. Death is back, but not only that, like his face is all burned, right? Lots of elements that Gardner Fox is bringing to the table. Gadgets are a big one, sort of the utility belt, although it is drawn in previous ones. He's like using it, the continuity, and a lot of things in this issue stick. One of the things that doesn't stick, obviously, is guns. What do you think of that story, by the way?
It's fun. I mean, it's a little short, and it's easy to make fun of with the kind of the plot holes that are set up. It's not like it's not a very robust story.
Yeah,
but it is certainly fun, and it's easy enough to like follow along and capture what's going on. But like today, that wouldn't fly.
No.
To allow for such extreme extremely flimsy like plot holes to be available.
Definitely. It is a different vibe than Bill Finger. Like, he immediately goes to sort of like, Bill Finger is doing a lot of like gangs and sort of like organized crime and like think Godfather. And this is more, think like Dracula or Frankenstein, right. Or, there's sort of like an eerie gothic vibe. And there's, poisons and powders and, inoculations and, things like that, secret laboratories and like skulls and it's a very different vibe. And it also, like you said, you said it's short. I think this is actually more pages than the last story I read, but it moves, right? Gardner Fox has like a very kinetic sort of thing. Like if you had to sum up the story, it's like Dr. Death's a bad guy. He takes out hits on people. He summons Batman through the newspaper. That doesn't go well. But then Batman gets the last laugh when he like just so happens to catch, Jabba trying to take out a hit. Like it's very simple story. So the next creator we're going to talk about is Sheldon Moldoff. Sheldon Moldoff is born in Manhattan in 1920. So he's a bit younger than most of the other people we've spoken about in the Golden Age. Bob Kane, Bill Finger, Gardner Fox, they're all born in the 1910s. Shelly Moldoff passes away in 2012. So he made it longer than most of the creators too. Most of the folks we talk about died in the 70s or 80s. This guy, passed away recently, just 10 years ago. He grew up in the Bronx. So born in Manhattan, grew up in the Bronx. And unlike most of the creators we've spoken about, he didn't have any higher education at all. In some brief Googling, I couldn't even find out where he went to high school. So he may not have even finished school. I don't know. But he is on record saying that he is totally self-taught in drawing. He would even go through newspapers and magazines and cut out hands and feet and faces and legs, and he'd paste them up in a sketchbook and then, imitate them right next to them, draw them over and over and over and over again. After sort of, that, he becomes really enamored with Flash Gordon pulp magazines and would practice imitating their art over and over and over and over again. He, after having been self-taught, tries to break into the comic book industry, don't have a lot of detail other than like he takes work to National and they hire him on. His first piece of work for them is a filler page. And a filler page is, if you think about the way that a comic book is constructed, it's a bunch of sheets of folded paper, folded in half and then stapled in the middle. So for every single sheet of paper, you end up with 4 pages of content because you have one half of the fold front and back, and then another half of the fold front and back. Sure. So let's say you have a story that's 7 pages long. You can print that on 2 sheets of paper, but then you have an extra page in the book left. So filler pages are what they sound like. They make sure that you have something to print if there's not enough story or there's not enough ads, like you're not able to sell an ad. So below is the first, in the document, Brian, if you go look, is the first filler page that Moldoff did. We don't have to go over the whole thing because there's a lot, but broad strokes, could you describe this page to people?
So in broad strokes, it says Odds and Ends by Moldoff at the top. There's a lot going on for sure. It looks like a bunch of sketches of possibly different historical figures at the time or something. We've got the biggest picture is a guy wearing a New York Mets.
I don't know. It's Lou Gehrig.
Okay, it's Lou Gehrig.
So whoever he played for. Baseball.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not a sports person. But yeah, he's holding a baseball bat. It's actually like a fairly decent like artistic drawing of like realism shading and stuff like that, smiling. But there's like a dude sitting on his elbow dressed like Tarzan and calling out at, like, I'm guessing it is Tarzan doing the Tarzan call or something, standing on a bunch of bags of money. So I'm guessing that there's a bunch of other little pictures referencing like Babe Ruth and pitcher Lee Grissom, and there's a depiction of a pirate, which I'm guessing is going to be the Pittsburgh Pirates. So this is all about baseball, but I also think, without like reading all this specifically, is it some sort of political statement about baseball? It's just a bunch of facts, right? Like if you think about, if you're a kid or a young man, right, who's just like into baseball, and you have an extra page, this is like things that might be interesting to you. So like one of the facts is like, in the last 25 years, only 2 men have covered first base for the Yanks, Wally Pipp and Gehrig. Right? Another one says... yeah. The reason I wondered if it was like a commentary was because you got Tarzan with all the money, but there's a little caption next to it that says, Tarzan, as he is called by his teammates, is baseball's highest paid star, and now, having crashed the movies, will be quite a wealthy man when he retires. So it's not making a statement at all. It is just like a cartoony depiction of like the wealth that he carries and the Tarzan nickname and stuff. Yeah,
I think if you pick up a young Brian Anders, you take him out of 1996 and you put him in 1938, right? This is your Wikipedia, right? Like just a bunch of random baseball facts.
Dang.
right? And, there's no photographs, right? So it's just some drawings, like some caricatures that are kind of fun and some realistic pictures. And it's just like talking about stuff. Because like, on the playground tomorrow, you're going to be like, did you know about Lou Gehrig? He's got all this money and they call him Tarzan, right?
Yeah.
So this particular filler page is notable not just because it was drawn by Shelly Moldoff or that it was Shelly Moldoff's first published work, but also because it appeared in the inside back cover of Action Comics #1. So the first appearance of Superman.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Back in January of this year, 2022, a copy of Action Comics #1 sold for $3.1 million. This picture is inside. So Shelly Moldoff is a part of that history.
Yeah.
Which is kind of cool. In the Golden Age, what Shelly is most famous for is covers. He did the cover to All American Comics #16, which is the first appearance of Green Lantern. It's like the first picture that anyone ever saw of Green Lantern. Shelly drew that, right? He drew the first cover to, the cover to many of the first issues of The Flash. So the first picture that anyone saw of The Flash, Shelly Moldoff drew that. In the Silver Age, the 1950s and 60s, Moldoff would become the primary Batman artist. So, I think it was like 55 through 65 or something like that. He's drawing the majority of all Batman stories. He was a ghost at that time, right? So even then, all the books still say that they're drawn by Bob Kane. So it's secret that Shelly Moldoff is the one doing it.
When you say a ghost, you mean he's a ghost writer?
Ghost artist, yeah. So like
ghost artist.
It all says Bob Kane, and if you ask anyone like DC who's drawing Batman, it's Bob Kane. But Shelly Moldoff is the one really doing it throughout most of the 50s and 60s.
Yeah, this is a really common thing at the time across the whole industry. So like even there's famous examples of like Elvis Presley. He would sing other people's songs, but the only way he would do that is if he could buy the writing credits from them. So it could always say written and recorded by Elvis Presley, even though like he didn't actually write it.
Right.
And so there's like examples upon examples of this in the industry at the time.
Yeah, it's ghostwriting is even something that's not that uncommon today. Like if you are buying like a business memoir, like of someone who's not an author, that book is often written by someone that it doesn't say on the front cover, right?
Right.
Yeah, because of the fact that Shelly Moldoff was the sort of primary artist in the 50s and 60s, he co-created several notable characters that we're going to talk about later, and he drew some really, really important sort of notable stories as well. So remember Shelly Moldoff, because when we get to the Silver Age, we're going to talk about him a lot. Why is he important to this episode of Bat Lessons? Moldoff spent a brief period of time in 1939 and 1940 as Bob Kane's assistant. So this is after the filler page that is in Action Comics #1, before he does all of the cover pages for, Green Lantern and The Flash. In a minute, we're going to read Detective Comics #31. And it's not the first issue he works on, but it's the first one that we're going to read. And I can't find a definitive source, like for sure, of what exactly he did. Some sources say he lettered, some say he inked, some said he did pencils. It's unfortunately likely that no one knows exactly what he did because Bob Kane was taking credit for everything in this earliest period. But knowing what we know about Bob, it's likely that he did a little bit of all of it. And I personally think, if I'm trying to read into it, like we noticed the difference in storytelling going from Bill Finger to Gardner Fox. I personally think there's some art differences as well. We see differences in the paneling and things like that. Maybe it's just a placebo. I don't know for sure. But when we read this next book, know that Shelly Moldoff worked on the art.
Okay.
And that he's one of the first people that's not Bob Kane to do so.
Let's do it.
Okay. So Detective Comics #31, written by Gardner Fox with art by Shelly Moldoff.
Let's remind everyone again, just to make sure.
Sure.
Number 27 was the first Batman?
Yes.
So this is 4 episodes. So there's one issue between the one we just read and this one, right?
Yeah, so 29 is the second half of the story. It's the return of Dr. Death. We're going to read the first half of another two-parter, right? It was 31, so it's the sort of the very next Batman story.
Just to nitpick, we just read 29, and 30 was part 2 of 29, where Dr. Death comes back. Okay.
Yes. So, Brian, right now on the screen, we have one of the most famous covers of Detective Comics ever.
I can see why.
Yeah, do you want to describe it to people?
Somewhat of a tangent. I just watched the 1940 something Fantasia.
Oh, yeah.
And it looks just like this when the demon is coming up out of the mountain. Or it's supposed to be Satan, I think.
Sure.
So we've got Batman, huge, up over the, like, in the background of this mountain. So there's this rocky mountain with a castle up on the peak of this mountain, the summit of this mountain. Looks like Dr. Death's castle. I mean, if we're rolling with continuity here. There's a dude in the very far foreground who is wearing a full-on, like, red Holocaust cloak. I think that's what they're called. With, like, a red bag over his head or mask. He's got a skull and crossbones on the chest, so which also makes me think maybe this is what Dr. Death becomes or something because of the death reference. And this big red cloaked individual is carrying a woman who is either passed out or is shrieking in fear and seemingly running up towards this castle. And so you've got, in the background of all of that, you've got Batman standing, the moon behind him. Obviously, he's got his head tilted down a little bit, and it looks like he is God looking over this whole scene a little bit.
Very, very serious look on his face. Like, he looks like he's gonna mess you up.
Yeah.
Angry look almost. And in the lower right, it says, powerful and awesome, the mysterious Batman again appears to oppose the evil forces of a terrifying master of crime known as the Monk. It's interesting that you kind of like jump to Dr. Death, because there's a lot of sort of repeated themes of sort of like the Gothic horror almost, right? Like it's like evoking this sort of like Eastern European castle, supernatural sort of like occult, like dark vibe, and that is something that Gardner Fox definitely brings to the table. This is not Dr. Death, that is the Monk, and he's wearing what frankly looks like kind of a Ku Klux Klan uniform, right?
But all red,
and it's a kind of a hood with eyes cut out, and this is the Monk. The title card. This is the first time we have sort of the semblance of the Batman logo, which I think is really interesting. You've got Batman, where really all you see is his face, right? And then the rest of it, his wings are sort of more symbolic than it is the person. And then it says Bat on the left and Man on the right. And this is kind of the way the Batman logo ends up for years and years and years to come, right? Like if you look up like Batman 66, their logo looks almost like this.
Doodly-doodly-doo.
Yeah. And the title card says, the Batman, weird menace to all crime, at last meets an opponent worthy of his mettle. A strange creature, cowled like a monk, but possessing the powers of Satan. A man whose powers are uncanny, whose brain is the product of years of intense study and seclusion. Yeah, they call it a cowl. I don't know why they call it a cowl. And they say he's like a monk. It doesn't look like a monk to me at all. I think they're saying like a Catholic monk who would be in like the sort of brown habit, right? But it doesn't look like that. It looks
kind of
like
a friar, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. But instead, you've got like something covering the face entirely, like a Klansman. He
looks like Cobra Commander, like the hooded
Commander
from G.I. Joe.
I didn't watch G.I. Joe. He does look like Cobra Commander, except it's red instead of blue.
Yeah.
Bad guy. He looks like a bad guy.
He definitely looks like a bad guy.
So we jump to the first few panels, and we're in the city, and he's jumping from rooftop to rooftop. And here's something in the first panel that Gardner Fox is introducing that doesn't stick. It reads, through the dark of a New York night. In this story, Batman is in New York.
Oh, he's not in Gotham City.
No,
he's in New York.
Gotham doesn't exist yet, right? So
Gotham doesn't exist.
Fifth issue, right?
I'm reading through this like expecting you to say that he's like flying or something.
No.
I totally disregarded the whole New York night thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
In previous issues, they've either not said anything about it at all, and they've just drawn it as a city, or in the one we just read, they called it the bustling metropolis. This is the first time Gardner Fox is saying, "I'm building out the mythos of Batman. He's from New York."
Huh?
Doesn't stick.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
That's kind of wild.
Speaking of wild, this issue, it's going to get wild. Hang tight.
Okay. Do I need to get like some paper ready, like to tally up all the deaths or something?
No. It's going to be ridiculous. Just wait.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So Batman is sort of like prancing about the rooftops. We have like 4 panels here right off the bat where he's jumping from one building to another. That middle top panel is one that Bob Kane traces over and over and over again. Like this is like the 3rd or 4th time it's appeared in the first like 4 issues of Batman, where he's like sort of like crouching. This is a trace of a Tarzan. This is the promotional image that we talked about in a previous episode. I think it's funny that it just like keeps appearing. the same panel. And then he jumps to another building, and then he jumps to the top of a power line, like the big wooden, with the wires coming off of it. And it says he cites his quarry.
This next panel, we've got a man and a woman, man wearing suit and fedora, and this woman across from him. And she says, I have been sent to you by the master monk. And the man goes, help. And then in the next scene, I'm a little speechless. Did he just hang himself?
No. Yeah, so the visual storytelling in this is not the best. Let me explain what's actually happening in the panels.
Okay.
I only know it because I read the story. So what's happening, right, is this woman who's like, it's a little scandalous, right? She's kind of got she looks like she's in a nightgown.
She's wearing
and
like
it's
a red robe.
Off one of the
falling
shoulders.
Off her shoulder. You're
Yeah,
right.
it's like
I didn't
very
see that.
sexual.
Risque.
Almost. Yeah. Risque is the right word. But this man's like super afraid, right? So he's backed up against the pole. Like he's backed up against the electrical pole, and his eyes are really wide, and he's got his hands up. He's like, help, right? And then the caption in the next panel says, as if in answer to the doomed man, right? So he's running away from this woman. Batman has taken his silk robe, and whipped him up, and he's pulling him up the electrical pole now, right?
I kind of feel dumb because it's like I ignored the continuity in the story where Batman is also at the top of this pole. Yeah, he's pulling. Man, the way I had read it was kind of this woman saying, I've been sent from the master monk. The guy realizes and is like freaking out, and then
kills himself because he's scared of the monk.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. It doesn't help that she has drawn to be sort of like sultry or whatever, and like not as intimidating, because this dude's scared, but seemingly not of her, right? Yeah. But knowing the story that's about to come, he's supposed to be scared of her, right? It's just bad art.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And the dude now at the top of the power pole says, "Who are you?" And Batman says, "Remain until I give you leave to go." And then he jumps off the light pole. And then this is going to blow your mind, Brian. I was telling you in this issue, we're going to have a lot of stuff that doesn't stick. The caption reads, "The Batman recognizes his fiancée, Julie Madison."
He has a fiancée.
He has a fiancée, and she's right here, scantily clad.
Wow. So yeah, Batman runs up at her and grabs her by the shoulders and shakes her a little bit. She looks quite a bit like Judy Garland from The Wizard of Oz.
Okay.
And she seemingly comes out of a trance or something. She's like, what am I doing here? Who are you? And so then the next panel is Batman driving in the car that she should totally recognize, because it's the same car that Bruce Wayne drives all the time. But Batman driving in his nice car, and Julie's in the passenger seat next to him, saying, "But if you are taking me home, how do you know where I live? Why won't you talk? You won't tell me a thing." So she's obviously a terrible detective. She's like, "I've been in this car a million times before, but who's at the driver's seat? I can't imagine."
Yeah, she doesn't know. Yeah. So Batman and Julie get to an apartment, or get to a house, right? And they're inside, right? And he's sort of like climbing out the window, and she says, "But won't you tell me who you are?" And Batman says, "Tell your fiance Bruce Wayne all that happened. Good night," and leaves. And then we cut to the next morning, and Bruce is sitting on the couch with Julie, right? He's smoking his pipe.
Smoking a pipe, yeah.
Yeah, he smokes a pipe every time. That's how you know, right? Not Batman, Bruce mode, smoking a pipe.
So yeah, in this next panel, Bruce Wayne is sitting next to Julie, smoking a pipe. Looks like Julie is staring at him kind of unhappily.
Yeah, crossed arms.
Yeah, crossed arms. I couldn't tell if that was her eye or if that was a tear, but I think it's her eye, and she's just mad. "Bruce, there is something I must tell you. A man dressed as an enormous bat found me last night on the street about to kill a man." "Good Lord, Julie. Suppose you had. We'd better see Dr. Trent right away."
And scarcely 2 hours later, they're now at the doctor.
"Young lady, I've seen victims of an expert hypnotist exhibit your symptoms. Don't you recall anything that would suggest something like that? I advise an ocean voyage."
Yeah, a little weird.
Yeah.
Yet, as Dr. Trent talks, Bruce Wayne notices his staring eyes and wonders, ... And he says, "Yes, an ocean voyage to Paris, and perhaps later to Hungary, the lands of history and, underlined, werewolves."
Okay.
Hungary, the land of history and werewolves. Sorry. I don't know why that's so funny to me in this moment. So we cut to Bruce Wayne. He's at a teller sort of window, and it says Lunar Lines. He says, 1 ticket to Paris, please. Port cabin. The next panel, he's standing there hugging his fiancée, Julie, and he says, I don't like the crack the doctor made about werewolves, Julie. And he seemed hypnotized himself when he gave you that advice, but maybe I'm imagining things. And she says, of course you are. I've worried about you, but I'll be good. I promise. She leaves on the boat. She gets on the boat, and she's this is her treatment. And then back at the Wayne Mansion, in his secret hangar known only to himself. Do you want to describe what's in this panel, Brian?
A really crazy looking helicopter thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's what I would expect the Batwing to look like if it was not a helicopter.
Right. It looks like a plane.
It looks like a plane. It even looks like it's got a propeller on the front.
Mm-hmm.
It's got those big bat wings for wings, but sticking up out of the top of it is helicopter blades.
Mm-hmm. And it says 2 new weapons, my bat gyro, in which to follow Julie, and the flying Batarang, modeled after the Australian bushman's boomerang. So these are 2 things, again, that Gardner Fox is introducing to the Batman mythos that stick. This is the first appearance of a Batarang. And the bat gyro is kind of a funny one. I don't know why a gyro, like a helicopter instead of a plane. Maybe that was like considered more advanced technology at the time, and so it's like more out there. But
maybe that's the way they're explaining that he doesn't have like a runway to take off from or something. Because at that time in technology, all they had is propellers.
Sure,
so they couldn't do like a jet like vertical takeoff or anything like that.
But it's also worth noting that maybe it's not worth noting. My brain is broken. So I think it's worth noting. This is the way I think that this helicopter actually wouldn't work because there's no propeller to counter the motion of the helicopter.
And the tail. Yeah. I know. But whoever wrote this is obviously not doing a ton of research
right.
Based on some of the other foibles. So it evokes a helicopter, but it is not a helicopter.
No, it's not. But what's really interesting is this is the first bat-themed vehicle and the first bat-themed weapon. So before, right, he has the utility belt and he gets a gas pellet out of it, but it's not the gas, the bat pellet, right? He has suction cups, but they're not the bat suction cups, right?
Right. He doesn't have bat logos on everything.
Yeah,
everywhere.
The car's not bat themed. But this vehicle, the gyro, is Batman themed, and he has a boomerang, and it's Batman themed as well.
So one more thing about the boomerang is in the, what do you call that, a cell, the square?
Panel.
The panel, thank you. The panel where it is introducing this Batarang, you see the motion lines of Batman throwing it, and it throws just like a boomerang where it comes back to you.
Mm-hmm. And then he gets in his bat gyro, and he flies away.
The Bat gyro is silhouetted by the moon, it's flying up in the air. There's a bunch of random people on the ground. It looks like a crowd of people. It actually looks like pandemonium, the way it's drawn. And they're saying, look, another person goes, a bat. And then another person says, the end of the world. We are attacked by Martians.
Yeah, so this is a War of the World moments. They see a flying bat. They're scared of it. He's striking fear to the hearts of...
Yeah.
And he's looking down upon this crowd. So there's a panel of him sort of peering out the side of the Batcopter. Again, moon behind him, and he's got a smile. So he's loving the fact that people are freaking out.
Chaos wherever I go. Ha ha ha.
And he goes out to sea, and now he's flying above the boat called the Lunar Lady, which is the one that Julie's on. And she looks up, and she says, a monster bat flying over the ocean. And go ahead. You should read it.
It's just... this idea of looking up and going, it's just, maybe I live with a different mind, but if I looked up and I saw something like this, I wouldn't think oh my God, a gigantic bat. I would think, a huge bat-shaped flying machine,
Yeah.
So yeah.
Personally, I would think it's a Martian, so.
Oh yeah, right. You'd think it, yeah. Good on you. You just like that person in the last panel. Yeah. But yeah, so while on board, the Lunar Lady, I don't know if there's any significance to the name of the boat being the Lunar Lady, but so. Julie looks up and a monster bat flying over the ocean. And it's this huge bat gyro flies up over the top of the boat. Batman looks over the edge and he puts it on autopilot, and then he climbs down a rope ladder.
I think it's really cool that he's got autopilot in 1938 or whatever, 39 or whatever.
Yeah, they didn't even have a name for it. They called it automatic controls.
Yeah, and he jumps off the rope ladder onto the deck of the boat. And Julie says, "You here?" Then the caption says, "Julie explains her plight to the Batman. And so that's why I'm here. If ... look out."
Wow, he got there just in time, apparently.
Yeah. And she's explaining her plight to him, which I'm not really sure that why we're to believe that she's in plight, right? Like she's going on this
Well, I think
boat ride
she's catching him up. She's like, so I went to the doctor and they said that I'm exhibiting signs of hypnosis.
Sure.
This is crazy. And then he told me that the cure is an ocean voyage. Mm-hmm. So that's why I'm here. So I'm guessing that's what she's saying to him.
I think you're right. You're probably right. But what you're saying is he's just in time because the monk.
Yeah, the monk, this red cloaked monk jumps out. The eyes of the gaunt figure seem to burn. He is the arch criminal known as the Monk. And so Batman...
Yeah, he's thinking to himself, that man has uncanny powers. I seem to be hypnotized. It's harder and harder to move. And so he's standing there with the Batarang. And I think we're supposed to think like he's frozen in time. Like he can't. He's like,
yeah. And there's like the what do you call it? Like aura of color around like his head and eyes that kind of suggests that he's under control. So then it says, by a tremendous effort of will, the Batman leaps into action. And you see him throw the Batarang. I mean, it's across the boat. It kind of looks like a tennis court, but throws it across the boat at the monk. So the monk ducks. It says the spell is broken, and the monk evades the Batarang. And so it goes whoosh right up over his head. And then the next panel, Batman he's leapt up and jumped onto the rope ladder. He catches the Batarang and apparently leaves.
This is like just a bunch of non sequiturs. He shows up at the boat for some reason. We're not sure why he's there. The monk shows up. Oh my God,
the Batman. Or the bad guy, run away!
Exactly. The monk just so happens to show up at the exact same time that Batman just so happens to show up. He, apparently, like, Julie's in danger, right? He has this, like, immense effort, like, the force of will to, like, break this hypnosis, throws the Batarang, pieces out. I'm gone. So it says, the Batman, anxious to get to the bottom of the mystery, follows the ship and the monk to Paris. So he flies his bat gyro all the way to Paris, and he's like landing on the rooftop of some building.
So I feel like I have to make this reference. The brave Sir Robin ran away, bravely ran away. When danger reared his ugly head, he bravely turned his tail and fled.
Leaves his fiance.
Yeah. Good luck, Julie.
So now he's in Paris, and it says the search begins, and he jumps, from rooftop to rooftop. And we have a few different panels here, right? There's one where like he's like looking in a window to a pub, and then there's another where he's like jumps onto a random car and then like looks in the window of the car. He's like on top of the car on his hands and knees, and he's like peering over the edge. Some random person driving, and the person who's driving the car is like leaning out the side and go, whoa.
Yeah, it's a taxi. It says cab.
Oh, I didn't catch that. Yeah. And he says, "Help the devil himself." Which, like, I can't blame the guy. Can you imagine if some dude just like jumped on the top of the car and then like started looking in the side window at you?
No, I mean, I can imagine my reaction being shock. I don't think it would be the devil himself. It'd be like, oh, there's a loon dressed up as a bat on top of my
I don't know about you, man. I'm driving my car off the road. I'm jumping so far out of my skin that the wheels just going whoo, and I'm like into the tree.
Oh, I'm slamming the brakes, and Batman is landing on the road in front of me. And depending on how scared I am, I'm driving him over.
The next panel says the weird figure is seen all over Paris until one night. And this is really interesting to me because it implies that like he's been looking for his wife in Paris for days.
Fiance.
Oh, sorry, fiance. Yes. And do you want to describe what happens in the next couple panels?
Ridiculousness. So Batman, the weird figure is seen all over Paris until one night. So on that note, he didn't just call and ask where she was. I'm guessing, well, I mean, he's Bruce Wayne too. So I guess I'm to take it that she was hypnotized and has been kidnapped, right?
Right. So I guess it's true. They never told us. There's two ways this could go, right? There's one that like Batman has run away, and the Batarang throw that he did at the monk was like sufficient. And like, she's just continuing on her cruise, right? Hunky dory, everything's fine, happy, happily all along. And like Bruce Wayne could just show up to wherever she's staying because that was the sort of turn of the trip. I think what they don't say, and I think what was happening is that like Batman bravely runs away and then like she's been kidnapped.
Yeah.
Why is she kidnapped?
That makes more sense.
I don't
based on
know.
the rest of this.
It's not clear to me what her particular relation to the monk is, right? Or why she's a target. You know, at the beginning of the story, she's been hypnotized to like perform murder, which like you could say like, well, any random person, right? Like is going to be hypnotized by the monk to like perform a murder for the monk. But like, why is he going to Paris with her to kidnap her? I don't know. But that's apparently what's happening.
There's a lot of like leading the witness and like just like an awful form of like Chekhov's gun where like it's like maybe the ocean liner will go to Hungary where there are werewolves, and that's like the plant in the reader's mind that maybe when they see werewolves they're like, oh, that's right, Hungary, the land of werewolves.
Yeah.
But like, why on earth would Bruce Wayne make any like? Why wouldn't you be like, yeah, go to France and stay away from Hungary where there are werewolves? Where does that comment come from at all? So, yeah, so based on these panels, the search begins. He's looking for Julie, which makes the connection for me better that she's been kidnapped or something.
Sure.
And then he's in this window. He goes, Julie, at last. And he seemingly steps into the window where it says, but a warm reception has been prepared for him. So I guess they've been waiting on Batman to show up. And it is Sasquatch. It is a like 10 to 12 foot tall, like woolly Bigfoot Sasquatch. Yeah. That's what it is, coming at him across this bedroom. And the Batman nimbly dodges the huge ape, only to fly through a sliding door and tumbles down into a gigantic net. And so now Batman is landed on this huge net, and I guess is captured or something.
This is what I'm talking about with Gardner Fox, where he's like boom, 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 right? Like he's looking for Julie for the first 4 panels of this page, right?
Yeah.
He comes to a window randomly, right? He's looking in, he sees her. She's lying in a bed. Next panel, he's in the room. There's an ape, 12 foot tall, coming at him, right? He dodges the huge ape to go through a sliding door, right? He's falling down a thing. Boom, he's in a row. So it's like hard left turn, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't make a lot of sense. And in the next panel, it says, caught like a rat in a trap as the net closes about him. And Batman is inside a rope, hanging from a chain. There's this balcony, and the monk's at the top of the balcony. It's all made out of stone, again, with the sort of like iron bars covering the windows, like they're in some sort of castle, right? And he's just hanging there, like, you know, Thor at the beginning of Thor Ragnarok, or like, you know.
That's right, yeah.
I want to say there's like a Three Musketeers story where something like this happens, but.
Yeah, probably.
So he's like fallen into this perfectly laid trap where like he comes in the window, is scared by a gigantic ape, to fall off a ledge into the net so that he could be hoisted, right? And it says the Batman once again faces the diabolical master, the monk. And the monk says, rash mortal, to dare face the power of the monk. Look below at your fate while I pull this lever. He's pulling a lever. And then do you want to tell us about the fate that is waiting for Batman?
Yeah, so they're obviously in some kind of a dungeon because there's also like chains on the walls and stuff. And it looks like there's a big opening below where he's hanging in this net. And the net slowly begins to descend into a den of snakes. So you wouldn't be able to tell from the picture that it was a den of snakes unless you could read the caption. But yeah, he's going into a den of snakes. And then in a flash, the Batman flips his Batarang and he hits the lever.
Right, so this is the switch that the monk has pulled to start lowering him.
Right, the switch, right. So he's
the Batarang
hits the switch back.
Yeah, flips it back.
And then the Batarang continues to fly in the same arc, and it crashes into the glass chandelier. And then it comes back to the Batman. He catches it. Still hanging in the net. So now he's no longer descending into the den of snakes, but they're in darkness, I guess, because the chandelier is broken.
And I don't know if we're in darkness or not. Maybe we are. But yeah, he catches his Batarang and he's got his other hand out like he's going to catch some glass.
Oh, good point.
Yeah. But what I really like is the text that we have inside the motion lines for the Batarang. It says zing.
Zing.
And then the next one says zip. that is a zing again.
I didn't even notice that. Yeah. I saw the last zing when it goes to the chandelier, but I didn't notice the other ones. That's
they're
good.
really small. And then the monk is standing there with the lever in his hand again, and he says, a heroic gesture, but a futile one. The lever will remain down this time, like he's going to flip it again. And then it says, working against time, the Batman severs strand after strand. So he's got a piece of glass from the chandelier, and he's like cutting the glass.
He's using the glass to cut the rope.
Yes, sorry.
Yeah, so Batman cuts through one rope, but it's a net, so he has to cut through a whole bunch of sections on the net to have a size big enough for himself to climb out. So then the next panel, we've got Batman jumping out of this net with a den of snakes below him. You can clearly see the snakes this time. And then Batman somehow jumps up to get onto the ledge where the monk is. The monk is running away from him at this point to hide or something. He goes through his door. And then Batman runs and jumps to the door. It says, the Batman in full pursuit of the fleeing monk, ... Suddenly, a barred door drops between the Batman and the monk. So the monk is truly a chess player. He's many, many moves ahead. He thought that Batman was going to show up, so he put an ape in Julie's room, prepared for Batman to jump out of the window to get away and land in a net. So it was like perfectly set and sprung trap. Then when he inevitably got out of the net that was going into the den of snakes, the monk was prepared for the next trap, moving like 3 moves ahead, right? For Batman to chase the monk through this door and then be stuck behind this barred gate again.
And the monk says, die here, you fool, while I send the girl, Julie, onto my castle in Hungary to feed my werewolves.
There's the werewolves again.
Yeah. And then it says the gigantic gorilla is lowered as the Batman is caged by bars all about him. So he's like caged up in bars and the giant gorilla is showing up.
I got 3 minutes with you. Bonesaw is ready.
And then either Batman has gotten shorter or this gorilla has gotten taller, because instead of 12 foot, he's like, 20 foot now.
He's like 15.
Yeah.
20, yeah. He's like 2 to 3 times as tall as Batman is. He's massive.
And it says the Batman makes a desperate leap for the rope that lowered the gorilla, right? So the gorilla is being lowered by a pulley on like a hook. And then he comes off of it, and then Batman jumps on the hook, right? So he's on that rope that just lowered the gorilla down. And it says, as he climbs hand over hand up the rope, he sights the guard about to draw a gun and then throws his batarang at this guard. I don't know where the guard came from, but he's at the top of a ledge, right? And the batarang hits his mark.
Batman is hanging from a rope by one hand. He's obviously thrown the batarang with the other, and you can see the swooshing motion, and it goes suck as it hits this bad guy right in the head, and he shoots straight. The bad guy shoots straight up in the air instead of shooting at Batman on this totally random ledge up in the sky.
Yeah, it's not clear to me if they're in the castle or they're out of the castle. They were in a dungeon at one point.
Yeah, there's certainly some like architectural continuity issues with the way this is, because he had jumped out of a window, so you'd think he'd be outside, but he landed in a net, but that net was actually in the dungeon. And then he climbed up the dungeon onto a ledge to chase the monk inside, where he got caught into an arena, it seems, maybe, based on like the whole cage situation, how they had to lower this massive ape gorilla thing.
This guard is the person who lowered the ape. I just realized the guard is sitting next to a big metal A-frame.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a rope.
Yeah.
I just put it together. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I did. I had worked that out, but
not me.
No, you're like 10 steps ahead of me on this whole thing, so I feel pretty fortunate that I got one out. So he hits that dude, but it is on this like random ledge that's just like floating up at the top of this. I don't know. The only way I can describe this room, the way it's been drawn, is some sort of square ground that goes up infinitely high.
Yeah.
And somewhere up there is a ledge in the corner with a door, and that's how you turn this crane on and off to drop the ape in. Like it's incredibly unrealistic. But anyway, somehow between this panel and the next panel, Batman has gotten out of this infinitely tall room, and it looks like he's running on the roof of this building or something, or he's about to jump out of a window from the building.
Yeah, he's found like a steeple or something at the top.
Yeah, to a rope ladder that's been hanging from his gyro. So the Bat Gyro, I guess, has been up there this whole time on autopilot.
Yeah, the caption says, the idling bat plane hovers above the Batman. They call it a bat plane. I just realized that's the first time they call it a bat plane.
But didn't they call it the Bat Gyro earlier?
Yeah, this is the first time they're calling it the bat plane.
Okay. It's not a plane. It's a helicopter.
Yep.
Okay. So he climbs up into the Bat plane / Bat Gyro, whatever they determine is going to be called from now on.
And it says, as a powerful car races towards Hungary, the shadow of the bat follows it. I think the implication here is that the monk has gotten into this car and is speeding off, right? And Batman gets into his Bat Gyro and is following it.
And so I'm kind of curious because of the way they've drawn this. Both of these panels have the car inside of the shadow of the Bat plane.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So does the monk know that the Bat plane is right overhead or not? Because either he's following him in a hidden sense or he's menacing him.
Sure. It could be really, I mean, that'd be really cool. Like I'm trying to like envision that in a movie where there's like this moment where the plane shows up and it's casting the shadow and it's like, oh no, the Batman. Like there's the striking fear into the heart of the criminals element. That would be really cool. I don't think they're implying that, but who knows? And then it says the Batman prepares to board the car from the air. So again, he's put the gyro into autopilot. He's climbing down this rope ladder as it's zooming along. You see the like speed lines as they're going down the road. And then we have a bunch of panels on this page that like have no caption, no text, right? He's kind of dangling from the rope with the speed lines. I think they're just like sitting in this moment like visually because it's just cool, right? Like,
sure.
And you have another panel where he's sort of like floating in air between the rope and the car. And he's like falling down. And then it says a glass pellet filled with gas is thrown into the car. So he throws one of his pellets into the window.
More of that deadly gas.
Yeah. And it says the car swerves into a tree. And you can see the car is like, the front end is like crunched up into a tree, right? Because you can't see because the gas.
That's extremely deadly. Like knowing how cars were made at that time, like they didn't even have seatbelts. They made these cars that are like tanks so that they wouldn't get all dented up. But like when they'd get in accidents, the people inside would turn to confetti essentially.
Yeah. Or Jell-O.
So like Julie's inside of this car, right?
Yes.
So presumably everyone inside that car is dead now.
For the sake of the story, they're not, but you're absolutely right. And Batman says the monk knew better than to come, but I can save Julie. So the implication is that the monk is not in this car. Like he thinks he's been following the monk, but now he gets down on the ground. Monk's not there. And do you want to describe the last few panels?
He just killed Julie instead. So he's running. Batman is running with Julie up over his shoulder. He runs and leaps up onto the rope ladder for the bat plane. Mm-hmm. He climbs up the bat plane. He's flying in that, and he's holding Julie in the cockpit. He says, poor kid. He sets his autopilot for Hungary, the home of the vicious monk and his werewolves.
And we kind of fly off towards the moon.
And that's the last panel.
Yeah, it's the last panel. It says, continue the thrilling adventure of the Batman and his combat against the mysterious monk. What plans has the monk in mind? Why does he want Julie? See the next episode of the Batman. They call it an episode, I just realized, instead of issue. So I think this is a really interesting time capsule because you get the vibe for like what Gardner Fox is going for. Where Bill Finger is a lot of like organized crime and sort of like robbers. You know, he does a story about jewel thieves in number 28. Number 27 is like these business people that are like killing each other over a contract. You know, Gardner Fox is like a lot of like occult and sort of like fantasy, hypnotists and poison chemicals and powders. He sets it in New York, but then he's globetrotting. He goes to Paris and he goes to Hungary. There's werewolves, which we don't see in this issue, but rest assured.
He doesn't actually get to Hungary.
He does, yeah. So the next issue, this is a two-parter. We read the first half.
Oh, no. I mean, in this, sorry, I meant in this issue, no. He doesn't get, yeah, he's headed to Hungary at the end. That's
right. So that whole bit with the castle and everything is happening in Paris. If we want to talk a little bit about ways that potentially Shelly Moldoff has influenced this story versus Bob Kane art. One of the things that I notice is that Batman's ears, I think, are a little bit longer. Again, it's maybe placebo, But
I think they're attached in a different location as well.
They might be, yeah. Too. This is the first time we see the occurrence of that sort of like Batman logo. Another thing that Moldoff, I think, probably brought to this is that the panels are less of a grid. You have here on page 1, the very first panel is like almost double height, and it pushes the fourth panel down to make room for it. We also have multiple instances of art being drawn outside of the panel line. So on page number 2, panel number 4, Batman's ears are sticking up outside the panel, which is not something that Bob Kane did, or at least is not present in other issues of Batman up until this point. I think on page 5, I'm not sure, there's that scene of like the crowded New York street and everyone's sort of like panicking because they see the side of Batman. It's not only double height, it's kind of double width. Right. So we're seeing like more interesting panel layouts. We're seeing things being drawn outside of panel lines. So, who's to say whether this is Shelly Moldoff or whether this is Bob Kane, but it is different, right? We're starting to see some evolution in the way that the art is occurring.
Definitely.
So thoughts on this issue of Batman?
It's fun. It's a little Silver Agey in that it's ridiculous. It doesn't seem to be quite as gritty as the previous ones have been. There's definitely a mystery that they're solving. I like that they've been continuing with the just kind of general mystery story of the Batman stories so far. I like the idea of 2-parters because they've got more time to tell the story. That's one of the reasons I like docuseries over documentaries or television series over movies. Is you've got more time to develop characters and develop story and stuff.
Yeah, it was something that you mentioned after we read number 27 at the very last panel of the first Batman story. They say, they tell you that Bruce Wayne is Batman, even though they hadn't done it throughout the rest of the panels. And you were like, man, I wish they had drawn that out. And I think at this time, the assumption is that like you're buying stuff off the newsstand and there's no guarantee, right? Like no one has a subscription to Batman, right? That you're going to be able to read both issues of a story. And so they really avoid continuity in a big way for a long time. Even in these 2-parters, they make, sort of intentionally have things wrap up. So like Julie at the end of this is no longer in danger. He rescues her. And like, yeah, he's going to follow the monk to Hungary, but that sort of like imminent threat is gone. He's just like going after the bad guy. Right. So, Stan Lee, his ethos kind of famously, he said that like every comic is someone's first comic. And so they would often in sort of, the 60s during all sort of the boom of Marvel comics, they would repeat things over and over and over again. They would explain people's origin story. They would explain people's powers. They would, It was very, very verbose in that way. And that's just following out of like the Golden Age. They're doing a lot of that same sort of thing. So it is exciting to see some semblance of like continuity of an ongoing story sort of being introduced.
Definitely. Well, and it is kind of interesting. As you were talking, I was thinking about how they had those, I don't remember what they were called, but they had those books that would release like one page of the newspaper at a time.
Oh, okay.
And like there were these writers who were famous for just being extremely verbose and descriptive of the rooms and stuff, so that they could like get more time to develop their story between issues, but also sell more because they got paid by the page or whatever, so they'd make more money by just like drawing it out. That was obviously like books in general were a developed concept, and then like inserting them into the newspaper was like a newer thing so that you could have this like serial story.
Right.
And so comic books, like being in their infancy at this point, don't have that same type of luxury to assume that you can have readers return week after week serially to develop on the previous story. So like this is probably a pretty fresh concept of continuity in general for comics, right?
Yeah. There are recurring comic strips that show up in newspapers that tell a story over time. Like, I think we even talked about that Malcolm Wheeler Nicholson had done an adaptation of Swiss Family Robinson that was appearing in newspapers over and over and over again. Because someone might have a subscription to a newspaper, and because they, the color comics were only coming on the weekends, right? Like the Sunday funnies. It was more reasonable for someone to assume that someone's reading every single iteration of a comic because, they get the same newspaper every Sunday, right?
And everyone's reading the news.
That's right. Whereas like a comic book is more disposable, right? Like it's on newsstands. You're just happening to pick it up. Whereas it does become the case that eventually people become diehard fans, right? And the sort of hobby store crops up, right? A comic book store crops up, and people are going to places that are not just the newsstand to get their books. And that is kind of one of the most defining characteristics of comic books in the modern era is the continuity, right? The fact that they all tie into each other and they have, crossovers and sort of like events that impact, future stories and things like that. But it doesn't happen a ton here at first.
Right. And so I think based on Detective Comics 27 coming out when it did, it makes perfect sense for them to introduce the character and reveal the alter ego in the same issue at the time.
Right.
But if they were like developing Batman from scratch today and no one had ever heard of Batman, they probably would have drawn it out.
Yeah, one of my favorite comic books ever is Ultimate Spider-Man, which was a alternate universe that they created. Basically, in the early 2000s, they were like, there's too much continuity, right? No one has read Spider-Man since the 60s, and especially if you're trying to get to a kid, right? They don't know all of these stories that have happened. So they relaunched everything, and they made a new Earth, right? It was a new universe, a parallel track. It was the Ultimate Universe, right? And a lot of it was retellings, right? So they would take a story that happened in the 80s, and they would do it again with a modern spin, where like the kids are in a high school in the 2000s or whatever. And it's kind of famous that like the first issue of Spider-Man in Amazing Fantasy 15 is like, 12 pages or something like that. And it does all of it, right? He does the sort of wrestling match and like makes the costume and like gets bitten by the spider and Uncle Ben dies. And like all of those things happen, right, in one issue in like 12 pages.
Covers a ton of ground.
Yeah. Which is like, ends up as like a 2-hour movie for Sam Raimi, or in Ultimate Spider-Man is like 6 issues, right? It's literally a trade paperback that, they make it last forever. He stays in high school for a very short period of time. In Ultimate Comics, like he's in high school the whole series, right? Like the sort of like methodology of storytelling has changed significantly. People call it, I don't like this term, but there's this sort of derogatory way that they talk about modern comics of decompression, where like back in the day, right, because they had to tell a complete story in however many pages, like they had to pack a lot of stuff in, right? And so you read the story we just did, and like Batman's in New York and he's like rescuing a person, and his wife is hypnotized and she's going on a boat, and like he's fighting the monk on a boat, and then he's fighting the monk in Paris, and then they're going to Hungary, right? Like tons of stuff is happening. And they're like, well, now people are writing to the trade and there's decompression and like nothing happens. Like they're unhappy that there's less storytelling, right? But to me, which makes sense, right? Like if you're paying like $4 an issue or whatever, and like there's one action sequence in the entire thing, like people get upset that they're paying a lot for not a lot of story. But like to me, what's exciting about that is you get more time to sort of sit with the character and like understand their motivation and understand their personality. And it's not just like A happens, then B happens, then C happens, right? Like you get to have this sort of like cerebral conversation about like, what is the relationship between, Batman and his villains, and he's putting them away in the asylum, and like how do they feel about that? And like, why, is there a cyclical nature? It's like, there's introspection and metatextual sort of like, content that ends up in these books. But
it reminds me of this interview that I saw with, I think it was Hugh Jackman, and they were talking about Logan, the X-Men movie, and how excited they were when 20th Century Fox approved a rated R film, because the writing changed a whole bunch. They were kind of hamstrung by doing PG-13 because it has to happen at a certain pace for the attention span of a 13-year-old to keep up, because that's going to be like your biggest target market is like the teens and the young adults and stuff. When they got the R rating approval, they totally changed the story because they could be slower. They could draw things out. They could do a lot more character development. They could talk about much more mature concepts and motivations of the character in the story, which is definitely my favorite X-Men movie is Logan, because of the pace and how much more complex the characters are and stuff. And so like I think about that in writing in movies a lot, of like Steven Spielberg is a good example where a lot of his movies aren't about what you think they're about. Like Jurassic Park isn't about dinosaurs. It's really about the character development between Dr. Grant and these two kids, Dr. Grant not liking kids at the beginning, and these kids not having a father due to divorce, and so they like bond with each other. So the whole movie is really about like this complicated string of character development that I really enjoy, and I like slower movies because they do a lot more of that character development. So this like decompression thing, I think I would appreciate a lot because of the character development.
Yeah.
But I don't have a 13-year-old attention span either. So I understand like if it's aimed at kids, maybe kids won't like that much.
And you're also not going to the comic book store every week to pay $4 for the next 10, or 20 pages of a story, right?
Right.
If you're reading a comic book at all, which I assume you're not doing very often, you're going to buy a book
I'm not.
where it's already done, right? And everything's all together, and you can appreciate it as one unit. So
yeah, and I do that with podcasts frequently. If I know that they're doing a season that's serially, I'll wait until they have all the episodes out and like season 4 starts to roll or something, and then I can binge the whole thing at once.
Yeah. What do you think about Batman having a fiance?
It's interesting. There's a bunch of different ways they could go with that. It is disappointing that they didn't develop the romance from the start. They just like introduced like this is a fiance. So you don't know anything about her. You don't know why this really unusual person that's rich called Bruce Wayne / Batman would be interested in this woman so much to put a ring on it,
And not tell her, right? Not trust her.
Yeah, and not tell her about being Batman. Exactly. But also it sounds like if, like as far as storytelling goes, there's this huge opportunity in storytelling for her to continue to be like the damsel in distress that he has to save. And which I know is really common in like that sort of like sexist storytelling is the woman's always a damsel in distress.
Yeah.
Probably until Wonder Woman rolls around, I guess.
Wonder Woman, I think, is not far from here.
Okay.
She's in like a year or two.
Okay.
And unfortunately, her books are progressive in a sense, but not as much as you would hope.
So I can easily see, like at the time that this is being told, her recurringly being in these bad situations and Batman having to save her, and hopefully no one ever like figures out the connection between them, or else they will intentionally start kidnapping her to bait him and stuff.
Right. The Spider-Man dynamic.
Right. Yeah. With
Mary Jane and Aunt May.
Aunt May, yeah. What was the blonde's name?
Gwen Stacy.
Gwen Stacy, that's right.
Speaking of things that don't last for very long in Spider-Man, what you were saying about like having that sort of like ongoing thread of like there's this sort of family attachment where bad guys are going to get at them, and there's like there is a story dynamic there that is one that's like really common in Spider-Man of like it's a way to get at him because he has this. As far as I know, Julie doesn't appear in any more issues of Batman. Gardner
ever?
No, I don't think so. To be fair, I have not read all of the Golden Age stuff, but it's a Gardner Fox thing. And Bill Finger, there's a lot of stuff that he kind of just doesn't touch, right? Like you're familiar with the term retcon, right? Retroactive continuity. Yeah. That's where like someone has an explanation. Like they come along and they undo a story thread, or they explain that like, oh, that was a clone, or that person was mind controlled, or that was a dream. Like there's a reason. As far as I know, Bill Finger doesn't bother to retcon any of this stuff from Gardner Fox. He doesn't like the fact that Batman's in Gotham and not New York City. I don't think they don't hang a lantern on it. They don't say like, oh, and now he's in Gotham. It's like they just call it Gotham, and now it was Gotham, right? Did you Google it? Or did you find something?
I'm Googling Julie Madison. I'm guessing you're responding to my eyebrows.
Yeah. Well, I saw you looking over at the side, but
yeah. In Detective Comics number 40, they establish her as an actress.
Okay.
And then she shows up in Detective Comics number 49. And then it looks like from there she disappears.
Okay. So she shows up a couple times. And 40 and 49 would be Bill Finger. So Bill Finger does write stories that include her, apparently.
Okay.
There you go.
But yeah, she disappears for 60 years. So there's a picture of her in Batman Volume 2, number 33, September 2014.
Oh, wow. That's fun. So that would be... that's New 52.
Okay. Yeah, so there's the original version, post-crisis. I'm guessing you know what that means?
Yeah, post-crisis would be
the New 52.
Modern age. So that's like between 89 and 2012.
Yeah, so there's a 6-issue miniseries, Batman and the Monster Men, published in 2006.
Okay. Yeah, that's an important one.
And that's when they reintroduced Julie Madison.
Okay. So
as a law student, yeah.
Not the case that no one ever touches that thread again. I think there is a draw like of new creators to go back and like mine these old stories for cool stuff. Like in fact, the first like 12 issues of Batman, someone did in the early 2000s. Like they just redid them all. Like they retold them in a modern way. Like it's the exact same stories. So like the case of the Chemical Syndicate from number 27 with like modern art and all that kind of stuff. So like I shouldn't say never comes back, but like I'm pretty sure as far as like the canon is concerned of like between now and like 2014 or whatever, or 2012, or like whenever someone was trying to be clever and like, I remember, you know, you read that, like wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Yeah. Yeah. Not an important character for sure.
Yeah. If you like the show, then you can help other people find us. Tell your friends about the show if you think they'd be interested. If you're using Apple Podcasts, tap the name of the show, scroll down, and find the place to give us a review. All you got to do is tap on the stars. But if you write a review, we might even read it on the show. If you're using Overcast, hit the star at the bottom of the now playing screen to recommend us. It helps us a lot. If we grow an audience, we can keep putting out episodes. You can find all of our episodes and show notes at batlessons.com. You can send us comments, questions, corrections, or even suggestions to contact@batlessons.com. Or you can tweet at us at batlessons.
Sidebar here, just jumping in to the scripted bit. Mm-hmm. We really would appreciate your feedback. We're kind of making this up as we go along. It is a hobby for us. Mm-hmm. I think we finally started to hit our rhythm. We're doing a little bit of history. We're reading some stories, and we're interested in if that, you know, is something that you're enjoying or not. Would you like us to do more stories, more history? Are you wanting, you know, more frequent episodes that are shorter? You know, let us know. Give us feedback. You know, no email too short, no tweet too small. You know, don't be afraid. We'd love to hear from you.
Definitely. Underscoring, we would love to hear from you. We would be incredibly stoked if we got more notifications from our Bat Lessons accounts.
Indeed.
Until next time, I'm Brian Anders.
And I'm Alex Cash.
Thanks for listening.
Speaking of things that don't last for very long in Spider-Man.
Oh, man. Okay, totally aside from the recording. Sure. Did I send you the Lego animation of the Gwen Stacy catch?
No.
Oh, man. I have to send it to you. It is really, really
Does
funny.
Her head pop off?
I don't want to say anything.
I can imagine that being really funny.
Share. Alex. Go. Feel free to. Oh, you're just going to watch it here. That's great.
By the way, talk about a really great scene in a really awful movie.
Mm-hmm.
Is this from a video game?
I don't know what it's from. I just saw it on Reddit
it's
and it
so
cracked
high
me
quality.
Up.
Like
it's really high quality, yeah.
You'd think this would be from one of the video games.
Yeah, I was going to guess that it was produced by Lego until the end. I was like, maybe they wouldn't do that. But
I mean,
it's super funny.
If you're doing like a tie-in game and you have to adapt this scene, maybe that's the way you go, right?
Oh, it's funny.
Better than seeing her neck snap.
Was it? Is that what happened? I thought it smacked her head on the ground really hard, and that's what killed her.
Maybe that's what happens in the movie, but her neck snaps in the comic book.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and just on a bridge, snap. They got in trouble for this, by the way.
Really?
Yeah, the writer and artist like kind of basically snuck it in. Like the editor was asleep at the wheel, and like didn't realize they snapped her neck, and they got in trouble after for being too graphic.